Hey everyone, in this video I'm just gonna go over more details on how to use this add-on called BioBlender. So the first part I'm gonna focus today, it's gonna be on the importer and all the main functions it can do. So just open Blender through the terminal by typing Blender, and now what we're gonna do is hit N, and if the add-on is installed correctly, we should have it here on the N panel. It's called BioBlender. So now we're gonna focus today on the material and on the importer section. So the first thing we have in our importer section is gonna be our type. So we can choose either protein slash DNA, RNA, or basically any polymer within our file. Then we can also choose molecule. That's gonna basically grab all the molecules within our file, and then both would bring both molecules and polymers. Then we have different visualization types, and we'll look some of them in more detail. And then we have a quality slider that basically let us pick between low and high. Low works pretty good for most of the cases. High, you might want to bring some, if you're bringing some as cartoons, then you might want to select high. It's not necessarily though. Low, they do look pretty good. But you just have that option. The one thing regarding high is that if you're importing a lot of proteins at the same time, then high is gonna mean more vertices in our mesh. So it's gonna take longer, and then again, some of these proteins might have thousands or even millions of vertices. So Blender is really good software, but it struggles once we have large amount of vertices, as most of other softwares do. Alright, so for now let's keep it at protein, DNA, RNA, so polymer type, surface, and then low resolution. And then we have this fast import that we should always have enabled unless we want vertex color data, or unless we want to import something as a ball and a stick. So for now, the default here, it's a PDB ID of ubiquitin 1UBQ. We can go ahead and import. So when we press import, we should get our protein here. This is a small protein, so it takes around like 1 second to have ubiquitin in our scene. As you guys see, I imported it as a surface. I can go ahead and move it over here, then change this surface to cartoon, and I can import then ubiquitin as a cartoon, and I get that also here. Now if I try to do cartoon pretty, the best thing here is to disable fast import. That way we get color data from our mesh. Since cartoon pretty, usually the main difference between cartoon and cartoon pretty is some border around alpha helices and also the color. So if you look at this, since this has vertex data, I can go to this material section, and then in the material I'm gonna have some default materials around, I think there are 13 materials here. I'm gonna select this called vertex, and I'm gonna hit apply. I'm missing the selection, so I have to select an object, hit apply. Now it looks green, but that's because we are in the viewport shading. But if we go to EV, or if we go to cycles, we can go to cycles also here, we see that we have that color data coming from coming directly from that mesh. So a note regarding color or vertex colors is that this case ubiquitin is only one chain, so it's gonna be color. If I were to bring this with vertex data, it's gonna come color per chain, so every chain would have a different color. But in this case, since it's only one chain, then it only has it's gonna have only that one color. In this case, the cartoon pretty has a rainbow pattern, but that's just the default for cartoon pretty, having this rainbow pattern and gray on the inside. So let's try importing a couple more proteins. So we can also batch import. So if I have a selection already made here, so if I go ahead and copy that over here, I see that now I have my 4-letter PDB ID, then separated with a comma, and then I can go ahead and do fast import. Let's bring them all as surfaces, and then I can go ahead and import them. Usually it takes around like 1 to 3 seconds for small proteins. If you go for larger proteins, then again the time is going to be dependent on that vertex count. So really large proteins might take a longer time. But as you see here, it took around 10 seconds to have these 9 proteins imported into our scene. As we see here, they're named according to that PDB ID we gave it. If we at any point give it a PDB ID that doesn't exist, then we're gonna get an error saying that that PDB could not be found. So let's just look at a couple of materials. So the default materials here, we can select vertex, which would basically color based on that vertex color data, but since we did a fast import, they're not gonna have that data, but we can do the electric or real in this case. We can also select the electric, that is basically plastic, and then some of these shaders are really basic, but some of them are not that basic, and it really you can also batch grab the entire selection and have a material applied to all of them at the same time. The main material that I would like to talk today are this real one that works really well in cycles. If we were to look at them, our proteins in cycles, then it really works really well as it has subsurface scattering. And then the other material I would like to mention also would be this cartoon material that only works on EV. And this material is really great if we want just a cartoon representation of our proteins. And then for EV only, we can also apply line art. So here I can select line art and then hit apply. I get a pretty big outline in this case, but I can go ahead and select one protein and make sure I fix the outline. So this value is around 0.001 as I see. So I can select that value for my protein, and then I can just copy that value, select all of them again, remove the line art, and then reapply the line art with that value selected. And now all of them should have that nice outline around them. And as we see, this outline also works as we change perspective. The lines change as well. So what else can we do with this importer? We can now look at an example. If we go back to ubiquitin, then we can grab import it as both as a B factor, or which we can test this one real quick. So we can go B factor, and this is basically gonna give us like this ribbon representation of the B factor of that protein. Then we can also have balls and sticks. So let's try to import balls and stick. For balls and sticks, we have to it's best to disable this fast import. That way we get vertex data. And in this case, I'm also gonna go ahead and change this to molecule first. So let's try molecule first with balls and sticks. And what we're gonna get here, it's basically all the molecules that are within that ubiquitin file. So in this case, these are all spheres representing water molecules that are within that PDB file. In other PDB files, we might have glucose or hemoglobin or some other yeah, not hemoglobin, but other molecules in our PDB. I can delete that, and then if we change to both in this case, then I can again import, and in this case I'm gonna get both those water molecules that we were seeing as spheres, and I'm also gonna get the representation of the entire protein as balls and sticks. Balls and sticks is the visualization mode that takes the longest. It also is the one that has the densest meshes. So I suggested for like if you're only gonna work on 1 or 2 proteins, you can use that mode, but in most cases it's best to use cartoon, and it depends on what you want to do, but just keep in mind that balls and sticks, it's the one that has the most vertices. So we see here it imported. Since we are doing, and usually also the reason also is slower is because we are using, we're not using that fast import, but that's kind of required for balls and sticks. But the good thing about not using it is that we get vertex color data. So if we go to vertex again, we can apply it, and since we're already in Eevee, we can see that it applies the color to our material. And then again, we can look at this material in cycles. We can also play around with it, make it, we can go to our material and then make it be metallic. So we can also change all those things. So we can basically play around with it and change all those settings here. We could also apply a hue node to this. If we don't want this color pattern that we get, we can also apply a hue node to it and get different colors based on the ones we import. Uh, what else can we do? So if we are in molecule, the other thing that we can do is that instead of typing the PDB, we can type the ligand ID. So in this case, the ligand ID usually is 3 letter. The PDB ID is 4 letter. Ligand ID is 3 letter. So in this case, GLC stands for glucose. And this you can find in the PDB databank. Same as you would find a protein, you can also find these ligands from the PDB databank. So now we can hit import, and then we should get our glucose molecule here. Again, we can apply the vertex material and just look at it in Eevee. Since we edited it to be metallic, that's why we're getting that metallic tone to it. One little trick here is that sometimes it's very useful to import just lots of these molecules at once. So if I type molecules and I have it ball and sticks molecule, then I'm gonna get a set of predefined molecules that are known to be within cells. So for example, water, ions, different ions, phosphates, cholesterol, hormones. You also get some hormones. So that's a fast way to getting, and this is gonna make more sense afterwards. Why it's sometimes useful to have a lot of molecules at once we go over some of the other features of the add-on. But for now, again, these are just some examples that I just imported. I'm gonna go ahead and apply vertex to all of them, and then again I can also apply line art. In this case, usually with 0.301 is what works the best for these small size molecules. And then as we see, we get our line art with our molecule. Again, we can even change this to being instead of metallic, if we want to make it transmission, then we can make it into what looks like glass. Here, this is not going to work with cycles because we have line art applied, and the line art is only for Eevee, but we can select all our molecules again, remove the line art from all of them, and then we get this nice look to our molecules if this is something that we want. Alright, so that's gonna be it for this video. Next we will we will talk about membranes.